conflict and global trade. But let's now move to the Middle East, where Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz has approved a military plan to conquer Gaza City and authorised the call-up of 60,000 reservists. His ministry confirmed the decision today as ceasefire mediators awaited an Israeli response to their latest truce proposal. The plan, accepted by Hamas, calls for a 60-day pause in fighting, staggered hostage releases, Palestinian prisoner swaps and increased humanitarian aid. Mediators Qatar and Egypt say it nearly is identical to a version Israel had earlier agreed to, but officials in Jerusalem insist any deal must secure the release of all hostages. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not commented directly, but last week vowed Israel would only accept an agreement on their conditions. Hamas, meanwhile, accused him, that being Benjamin Netanyahu, of risking another mischance for peace. On the ground, Gaza's civil defence has reported 48 deaths in fresh Israeli strikes, with residents calling flour white gold as aid remains scarce. Israel says its forces are working to dismantle Hamas and taking precautions to limit civilian harm. The war, now almost into its second year, has killed more than, into its third year, has killed more than 62,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza health officials. This alongside 1,219 people in Israel after Hamas's devastating October the 7th attack in 2023. Well, with us to discuss these latest developments, Peter Baum, a foreign editor of the Weekly Blitz, joining us live from London. Peter, as always, a pleasure to have you on the programme. Let's look at the significance of this approval. 60,000 reservists approved to be called up. Is this the moment where the whole of Gaza is taken over by Israel?
Potentially, yes. And this is the paradox. It's clear to me that the military strategists within the Netanyahu administration have won the day over the political strategists. I have no doubt about this. If Netanyahu actually does proceed with this plan to take over Gaza, his sole objective in doing this would be to completely annihilate whatever Hamas defense mechanisms they have left. Now, he's doing this in the knowledge that his borders are secure in the north, because Lebanon under Hezbollah are no longer a threat. The Lebanese army and the Lebanese government, with Trump's backing, are definitely seeing to that. We're witnessing that the Houthis very occasionally send a missile over, which has been intercepted, so their military threat has been diluted significantly. And Iran, because of the problems they're facing, as we've spoken about many times, with the water crisis, again, is no longer posing the threat. Hamas potentially could still pose the greatest threat to the Jewish state of Israel. And it's clear to me that the hawks within the government, the military strategists, have determined that the only way that Israel is going to secure an everlasting peace is by destroying Hamas. Now, militarily, I'm sure that they can achieve that objective because Hamas has been severely weakened. But diplomatically, it could be an absolute disaster.
Yes, and Peter, building on that, of course, there's been further disputes and comments made between Israel and Australia, as well as Israel and France, that over a potential two-state solution and recognition of a Palestinian state. But of course, there has been condemnation from several world leaders about the situation in Gaza. How do you think this offensive, now approved and confirmed with 60,000 extra troops on the ground potentially, how will that be seen by world leaders who have already spoken out against this offensive?
Okay, well, Trump clearly has decided to back Netanyahu because the Trump administration, the voice that Netanyahu only listens to, has determined, I think from the comments Trump made, that there will only be peace, or the hostages, excuse me, will only be safe when Hamas is defeated. So it is with that support from the US administration that Netanyahu feels emboldened. I think with all the diplomatic faux pas that the Israeli government has suffered in the last, let's be realistic, six months to a year, this current administration is willing to see that out. They will take on the chin whatever Macron throws at him, whatever Australia throws at him, in the knowledge that Trump is still supporting Netanyahu. So diplomatically, as I say, it will only exacerbate the wrath of those current world leaders who are critical of Netanyahu and the way they've conducted the Gaza war. But whilst he's got the backing of Donald Trump, I think he feels emboldened and will proceed with the ultimate objective of completely destroying whatever Hamas's military capabilities are.
Peter, we've spoken in recent days about the protests in Israel calling for an end to the conflict and a hostage deal. A hostage deal in some form is on the table. It looks like Israel is going to reject that deal and continue with the war. How are Israeli protesters and the public in Israel going to react to this confirmation?
Okay, now this issue, the protests in Israel, if they continue in with the power that they have continued in numbers, then this again could be apart from Trump deciding that Netanyahu is taking the wrong approach, and there's no sign of that yet. Domestic politics, i.e. the number of people protesting about the way Netanyahu is conducting in the war, would be, I should say, the only other reason why the Gaza initiative, let's say, will stop. So it remains to be seen, and we'll know this probably within the next 48 hours, if the protests in Israel are such that Netanyahu determines that it could bring him down politically, domestically, and therefore he may, let's say, row back from the statements, because it's only a statement at the moment, although the reservists have put a notice, as you quite rightly say, 60,000 of them, but that has not yet been given the green light for the actual military operation. It could be all bluff, it could be all bluster. We don't know yet, but I'm pretty sure, and your question was a very valid one, if the domestic protests in Israel continue as they have been continuing the last days, this could be the very reason why Netanyahu goes back to the negotiating table.
Peter, just before we move on, I do want to circle back to humanity at this point where diplomacy, of course, is the key point of discussion. But as we know, an offensive in Gaza City will have a humanitarian impact. There are displacement orders that have been issued and will be issued as different areas see military action on the ground. But how do you expect pressure on Israel, besides from the US, to come in if there is further calls of humanitarian crisis and civilian loss of life as a result of this offensive? Is Benjamin Netanyahu here isolating Israel on the international stage once again, and what could be the repercussions?
Okay, now this is a very valid point, because clearly what we've seen has been an anti-Netanyahu consensus amongst the vast majority of nations within the UN. We've seen aid groups coming out virtually in unison, condemning the way Israel is conducting the humanitarian aid. However, and I put a caveat on all this, what is definitely clear is that aid via the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is getting through. Aid also is getting through from various nations that have been supporting the GHF, although they are not giving public support, but behind the scenes, they definitely are. There's been aid drops from many European nations, Cyprus, Germany, Spain, the UAE and Jordan as well. So I think Netanyahu perceives that he can wear this one through, he can back this off. There was clearly be negative publicity, whatever Israel does, she will always receive that. But I think Netanyahu's cabinet have taken the view that with the increasing aid getting through to the Gazans, and with this new initiative that I think I spoke to you about yesterday, this click and collect system that seems to be working in about 15 distribution points now. I think Netanyahu that will all be taken into consideration, but I think that will be of secondary importance to the military strategy that the hawks within his administration are trying to influence him to go with.
Peter, as always, such a pleasure to have you on the programme and have your insights. Of course, many discussions set to take place following this confirmation and approval, and we will bring all of those updates to you. Let's now move, though, to North America, and President Donald Trump has lashed out once again at Federal Reserve.